Almonte's Key Food, proudly serving communities throughout Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island for over 30 years. When you shop Key Food, you'll always find fresh products, great weekly specials, and exceptional personalized service. Visit at any of their Key Food stores at 8235 153rd Avenue, Lindenwood, New York, 935 Rosedale Road, Valley Stream, New York, and 6620 Avenue U, Brooklyn, New York.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Now we're going to do a little segment we call the Political Roundtable. And joining me for this will be Troy Smith, the editor and publisher of Slingshot.news. You almost don't know where to start. There's so much going on in the political world, but here's a good place to start. Once again, just as Leslie Stahl at 60 Minutes told President Donald Trump to his face that there was never any evidence of Obama's administration spying on the Trump campaign, which, of course, thanks to the declassified documents put forward by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, we know absolutely definitively did happen. Now we have Kristen Welker of NBC insisting to President Trump that there's not an iota of evidence of fraud in the 2020 election. Troy, what do you make of all of this?
Well, Roger, I, like many Americans, was proud to see the president stand up for the millions of Americans who had their voice ripped away from them in the 2020 election. Let's get down to the brass tacks here. This was a stolen election in which the people's voice was taken from them, and a puppet president was installed that wreaked havoc not only on the United States but on the world, and put our country in a position where we essentially were moving backwards for 4 years economically, politically. Everything that we saw in the Biden years was a result of this stolen election. And so many millions of Americans went to the ballot box that day to vote for President Donald Trump because they wanted a change. They wanted to see a continuation of the policies under President Trump. So when Kristen Welker started throwing these accusations at the president that he was lying about the 2020 election, he was very clear on this. His quotes, I want to read them here so people get an idea of how the president stood up for us and stood up for the American people. He said the election was rigged, talking of 2020. It was a dirty election, and it's happening again right now in California. He said, referring to the mayoral and gubernatorial elections going on in that state right now. He said they're cheating on the elections. And then Welker comes back and pressed for evidence. And he says, look, all I have to do is look, and I listen to people, and let's see what happens. Do you think it's appropriate that they have an election and 5 days later they're nowhere close to picking a winner? They're crooked, just like you're crooked. Your press is crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked. And then eventually, Roger, he walks off of the interview. He says, I've had enough. Thank you for your time. He's very polite about it. He does not, it's not an insulting thing. It's more of a, I'm standing up for the people. So I'd like to get your thoughts on, that California election, what his statement is on that, and then just your thoughts on going forward. Are we going to get the truth about the 2020 election?
Well, first of all, the assertion that there's no evidence of fraud is, of course, a joke. The sworn testimony of the Fulton County Board of Elections officials before the state Senate under oath, 35,000 ballots with no matching signatures and no matching serial numbers were counted. Trump supposedly lost Georgia by 8,000 votes. There's proof right there, Kristen. Or 300,000 ballots showing up at Michigan at 3 o'clock in the morning that are supposedly mail-in ballots, but they've never been folded in half. Consequently, it means that they were never mailed. How's that for proof? Just that mathematical statistics don't make any sense. Trying to tell me that Joe Biden got 81 million votes, more votes for president than any candidate in American history, and that he ran an average of 20% better in African-American precincts in the urban centers of America than Barack Obama. Zero chance. I wish I had more time to prepare for the show, but by next week, I will have a list of all of the evidence. My good friend, by the way, Joe Hoft, has written a 3-volume book containing all the evidence that the 2020 election. But I think we're going to find out, because one of the charges that President Trump gave Tulsi Gabbard before she left office was to get to the bottom of what really happened in the 2020 election. And this pertains to both paper ballots, mail-in ballots, but also into the integrity and the security of electronic voting machines. But here's one thing you can say about the corporate media left. Once they get stuck on a narrative, like January 6th was an insurrection, or there was never any spying on Donald Trump's campaign, or the 2020 election was a clean and honest election, they will never, ever deviate, despite all of the evidence to the contrary. And you speak of California. This fellow Spencer Pratt's running a very interesting campaign. Seems kind of like a guy who came out of nowhere. The mayor, Karen Bass, an unabashed public fan of Mao Zedong and Fidel Castro, who she lists as her two greatest heroes. As you recall, they had some fires there. I think those fires are suspicious. There's been no building process. I think somebody wanted that real estate. And it appeared that Spencer Pratt had come out of nowhere in order to make the finals, because if no candidate gets 50% in the first round, they go to a second round until the two top voting getters face off. Then suddenly, a city council member who all night has been running third, suddenly there's a late drop of ballots and they're 90% for her. How incredible, how coincidental. Now it appears that he will narrowly miss the runoff. It certainly smells extremely fishy to me.
Well, and especially, Roger, it seems that as we go on, technology improves in almost every aspect of our lives. The phones get better. The televisions get better. The only thing that seems to get worse are the voting machines. And you have to look at that and say, oh, okay, this is a little intentional now. Come on. And, when we examine, like you just talked about, the statistical facts about the 2020 election, there's no doubt that the questionable activity far outnumbers the margins by which Joe Biden won the most important states. And Roger, when we look at 2024 and the election outcome where President Trump wins literally every swing state, we have to examine that and say, look, the numbers here just don't add up. And I think it's important, not just for President Trump, but for the country, that we get the truth on that, not only because it's important for our history, it's also to prevent it from happening again. And when we look at California and so many other elections, Roger, I don't think people have the confidence they once did, and 2020 is a huge part of that. We talked briefly there about the underhanded nature of the media, Roger, and how Trump was calling out the media. I also wanted to get your opinion on this latest story about the Southern Poverty Law Center. They've been caught funneling $4.1 million to extremist groups across the far right, the extremist groups they claim support President Trump. It turns out the SPLC has been funneling them millions and millions of dollars. They have reportedly maintained a covert network of paid informants embedded within extremist organizations for decades. The use of confidential sources is itself not unlawful, but law enforcement agencies, journalists, and intelligence services have relied upon informants throughout history. And the government's case is not based upon the mere existence of informants. Rather, prosecutors focus on how those informants are allegedly funded. So, Roger, they basically take millions of dollars, pump it into groups that have no activity or little activity. Those groups then go out and commit acts of violence or horrible protests like in Charlottesville where people lose their lives. And then the political right is blamed. I wanted to get your thoughts on this bombshell story about the SPLC.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about this a little bit later in the show. It really appears to me right now, based on this new superseding indictment, that the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a major fundraising scam, funneled over $1 million into groups that were directly tied into the infamous 2017 Charlottesville rally. So to put it another way, there wasn't enough right-wing extremism in the country for them to be able to raise money to fight. so they went out and paid to create it. An FBI agent a long time ago told me if you went to a Ku Klux Klan rally, the problem was there'd be 10 people there, 9 of them would be federal informants, and 1 would be an actual Klansman. I think that pretty much sums it up. Let's move on. What else you got for us today, Troy?
Well, Roger, there's a big lawsuit going on right now. It's breaking headlines, and it has to do with the UFC fight that's going to be hosted on the White House lawn. There was a filing made Saturday by a leftist group called the Public Integrity Project on behalf of 2 Virginia residents that contend that the Trump administration's authorization of the June 14th UFC event on the White House lawn was unlawful. The lawsuit says that such approval violated the National Park Service regulations prohibiting sporting events on federal parklands. I did a little research on this, Roger, and it turns out that since the National Park Service falls under the executive branch, that President Trump appears to have full legal authority to have this UFC event on the White House lawn. It appears that this lawsuit is really a leftist attack in order to get him to, it's basically just trying to make him look bad. I wanted to get your thoughts on this and many other lawsuits out there. We just saw a lawsuit where the Kennedy Center, Trump's renovations on that have been shut down. It appears that there's an effort by the judiciary at whatever cost to the people to stop President Trump from improving life for people in Washington, D.C. and doing things for the country.
You mentioned the Kennedy Center. This one is even more outrageous. So the Kennedy Center has needed renovations for so many decades. It is now physically dangerous. It is literally in danger of collapsing. It is in danger of being a public safety hazard. A federal judge overstepped their authority to order that it cannot even be closed down for renovations, and that the president doesn't have the authority to change the board, doesn't have the authority to change the name. So they would rather see it collapse into a pile of dust and maybe kill somebody than see the president get credit for restoring it into what it should be. A worldwide recognized center, exhibition center for the arts. The president, I think, has decided to just walk away. So he has essentially handed the entire hot potato over to Congress. And I suspect it'll only be a matter of time before the building collapses, or they do what they've did in the past, overspend tremendously for improvements that either never get made or where the workmanship is shoddy. Now, I don't have tickets to the UFC event. Wouldn't mind having them. I'm a UFC fan. Kobe Covington, one of my good friends. Others there among the UFC roster. But again, if the president is for somebody on the left is against us. Our biggest problem here are these tyrannical federal judges who are legislating from the bench, who are, I think, overturning the will of the American people in the last election. They don't even really care what the Congress thinks. It is the number one problem in the country. It's interesting that the president of El Salvador points out that corrupt judges were for a long time the bane of their society. They had a lawless society, one of the most dangerous countries in Central America. Today, one of the safest places and a prosperous economy and a safe place to live yet again. Jill Biden's book, which came up in our last interview, pretty extraordinary. I guess we have to go to a break. We'll be right back with a little bit more of our political roundtable with my good friend Troy Smith from Slingshot.news. But I want to come back and talk about Jill Biden's book. I understand you can find it in the fiction section of your local bookstore. We'll be right back. And we're back on the Roger Stone Show. I was going to talk about Jill Biden's book, but there's something more important I want to cover with my guest, Troy Smith. And that is the appointment by President Donald Trump of William J. Bill Pulte to be the acting director of national intelligence. The deep state is in absolute apoplexy over this. Oh my God, we have someone we can't control. Someone smart, tough, and fiercely loyal to the President of the United States. They are literally going out of their mind. He has no intelligence experience, they yell. Really? What was Allen Dulles before he was the head of the CIA? He was a lawyer. How does that qualify him to be an intelligence official? This is an absurdity. The president has chosen someone he trusts. The Office of National Intelligence is meant to be a check, oversees the FBI, the CIA, as well as naval and army intelligence. And they don't want oversight. If it were not for Tulsi Gabbard and the Office of ODNI, we would not know the truth about the Russian collusion hoax. We would not know the truth about the phony impeachment. We would not know that there were still 37 Biden-Obama officials, many of whom signed that famous letter of 51 claiming falsely that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. I think it's vitally important the president have someone he can trust in this position, and they have gone into high gear in their opposition.
Well, Roger, you're exactly right, and it's not just Pulte as well as Gabbard, who did a fantastic job. Tulsi Gabbard, who did an amazing job in this position. She has been attacked by the media time and time again as well. So we see that in this crucial position, Roger, anybody who has loyalty to the president comes under intense scrutiny. We have to ask ourselves why. And the answer is pretty clear. It's that the people who are doing things behind the guise of classification, whether it be surrounding the JFK assassination or what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, or anything of that nature, the people who are involved in covering up that kind of information, their biggest fear is that somebody with a patriotic sense, with a will to accomplish things, not some government bureaucrat, somebody with the will to accomplish things will be placed into that position and shed light on their misdeeds. Because in order for their corruption to continue, Roger, they can't have a spotlight on the past. They can't have a spotlight on things that they've done in the past that have really hurt this country tremendously.
I think that sums it up. I want to thank my guest, Troy Smith, for the Political Roundtable here on The Roger Stone Show. Until next week, God bless you and Godspeed.
Sacco and Felice, New York and New Jersey's premier attorneys at law. Their team brings decades of experience across a wide range of practice areas. Whatever life brings, they're your legal team. From everyday matters to complex cases, they've got you covered with the experience you need and the results you want. Because when life gets complicated, they make it simple. SaccoFelice.com. SACCOFILLAS.com. 2 C's, 2 L's.